Well, a budget based on false assumptions, that's the opposition's assessment of Wayne Swan's third budget. The opposition is questioning the budget numbers and the proposition that the mining boom will continue to deliver a tax windfall. Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey joins us in our Parliament House studio. Joe Hockey, welcome to breakfast.
Good morning, Fran.
On Sunday, you were suggesting that a reasonable time frame for the government to return to surplus was 3 to 4 years. That's the bar you set. The government's beaten it, back in the black in 3 years. Congratulations on offer?
Well, no, because it's not real. It's a budget based on quicksand. The government assumes that fewer people are going to smoke with higher taxes, but they assume there's going to be far greater investment in mining with higher taxes. It doesn't stack up. They're assuming that we're going to have the best terms of trade in 60 years, but there's no provision there at all for Greece or the impact that instability in Europe might have on the rest of the global economy. It's a budget of contradictions. There are spending measures there that you've got to ask serious questions about, and we will make statements about those in the next few days. But there are also savings measures that just aren't real.
OK, well, let's work through it a bit. You say it's predicated on the best terms of trade in 60 years. That is true. That is what it's based on. But that's presumably what Treasury is forecasting. I mean, no one can tell the future, but we certainly are enjoying a boom time, aren't we?
Well, you don't take it to an extreme. Last year, the government, based on their spending, we were highly critical of their out-year forecasts of growth. Based on their spending. We said they were spending either they were spending too much last year and their figures on the out years were correct, or they were spending the right amount and the figures on the out years were right. Now, the bottom line here is this. This budget is based on higher taxes. This budget is based on heroic assumptions. This budget has huge contradictions in it. For example, there's an assumption that a $9 billion a year tax on mining profits will not flow through to everyday households in the form of higher fertiliser prices, higher construction prices for bricks and mortar and steel, flow through in higher prices for plastics and everyday goods at the supermarket. Of course it will. These mining companies will pass it on. They're not just going to take a $9 billion a year hit on their profit. They're going to pass it on to everyday households.
This is the whole 40% tax, the super profits tax as it's described. The government just didn't dream this up because it needed a revenue stream. This was a recommendation contained within the Henry tax review.
No, this is it, Fran. It's not the same recommendation.
No, but it's basically the same direction. I mean, the members of the Henry Committee are supporting this.
Well, let me say this. They did not recommend that the government be on the hook for 40% of the losses. Henry did not recommend that. Henry did not recommend that the state governments keep in place royalty regime, which they can increase at a future time. And there are two fundamental differences between what the government has announced and what Henry recommended.
But it did recommend a profits tax on mining.
But it also recommended a whole lot of other things, like abolishing insurance taxes, abolishing luxury car taxes, increasing the tax-free threshold for everyday Australians to $25,000, and they didn't accept those.
Now, the thing is, you basically are hammering this line, this is a budget built on quicksand, false assumptions, shonky assumptions. You can say that as much as you like, but the fact is, Treasury has given them these assumptions. What other forecast can they base it on?
Well, I would think...
And on that, while every other developed country is still in surplus, this country will be back in the black. That's a pretty compelling story to tell.
Well, they went into this, Fran, in far better position than any other country in the world.
Acknowledged, no doubt about that.
And we left them with surpluses, which they've spent. We left them with 4% unemployment. Now they claim that full employment is 4.75%. We left them with 4% unemployment. We left them with an economy that was roaring along, and now they're trying to claim credit somehow for Australia not going into recession, and they want to start spending all the surpluses next time. This budget is based, all this talk about a surplus, it's in 3 years' time, Fran.
That's pretty quick. On the weekend you were saying 3 to 4 years would be a good effort.
Yeah, but it's got to be a real surplus, not a $1 billion surplus. I mean, come on. They've had $1 billion blowout just on the computers.
Now, I remember your side of
program.
politics delivering a very tiny surplus and claiming it's a surplus.
Well, we delivered. That's the key word. That's the key word, Fran. We delivered. We delivered a surplus. These guys with a $1 billion surplus in 3 years and a $5 billion surplus in 4 years, it's a wish and a hope and a prayer. And I'll explain the key reason why, Fran, is you look at the blowouts on their spending this year, like the $1 billion on border protection. They're spending $1 billion.
You'd support that, wouldn't you? You want them to take tougher
Well, they
action.
should have fixed the policy in the first place. $1 billion on pink bat program repair job, $500 million on a bureaucracy on health that Kevin Rudd promised 4 weeks ago would not exist. They're the sorts of blowouts and waste that Kevin Rudd expects us to believe he will not have at all for the next 3 years to deliver his $1 billion surplus.
Okay, well, what are you going to block in this? Apart from the mining tax, we know when that comes up next term, you
will see what we have to say in detail about this budget in the not too distant future.
Now, you keep tempting us, and others from the coalition keep tempting us that over the next few weeks we are going to get some announcements from the coalition. Are we going to get policy, real policy, flesh on the bones policy from the coalition over the next few weeks? Is that what you're telling us?
We've already given some flesh on the bone. I mean, for crying out loud, we have a paid parental leave scheme that has got lots of flesh on the bones. I mean, that's an example. We're the only party with a climate change policy. As of last night, Kevin Rudd had no climate change policy. In fact, maybe you can explain it to me, Fran, because I'm confused about whether they're reintroducing the emissions trading scheme or not.
All right, so
they talked about it, but they don't have it in the budget.
All right,
last year they had it in the budget, and then they dropped it.
Before you go, though, just on Thursday night and over the coming weeks, what are we going to get from the coalition?
Wait and see.
Meanwhile, this is not a pre-election budget. That's what Wayne Swan says.
Well,
it does make it difficult. Does it neutralise your attack on debt and deficit?
Oh, no way. Because they're borrowing $711 million a week for the next 3 years to fund the government. That's what I call debt.
So you'll keep up that theme.
Amen.
Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Fran.